On July the 10th of 2021, 39-year-old Nicholas Cameron from Australia was bludgeoned to death by 50-year-old Stuart Henron. At the time of his murder, Cameron was in an on and off relationship with the dominatrix by the name of Heidi Bose, who had come to the conclusion that she wanted out of the relationship for good. Earlier in 2021, Henron and Bose had made contact on a fetish exploration website, and the two started having sexual encounters. During their encounters, Bose began confiding in Henron about Cameron and that she wanted out of the relationship, eventually asking her submissive to convince the younger man to pack his bags by means of scaring him, to which Henron allegedly replied, "I'm 99.9% sure I can convince him to never contact or speak to you again, milady." On the 9th of July, the plan was set into motion. Bose texted Cameron asking him to meet her at her apartment, while Henron was lying in wait at Cameron's home. When Cameron left his house, shortly after midnight, he was immediately rushed by Henron, who instead of just scaring the man, started battering him right away with various weapons, including a hammer. Cameron suffered 14 separate skull fractures among many other injuries and died at the scene. Police were able to arrest Henron not long after, and right away he claimed that he had seen the younger man dealing drugs to children, spurring the confrontation and attack. When police started digging deeper, they found 2 folders on his computer, one titled Target and the other Heidi. These 2 folders helped reveal what the real motivation behind the attack was and what had really happened. When Heidi Bose was finally brought into the picture, it quickly became apparent that she had not intended for Cameron to die. She had wanted to see her submissive confront her ex and give the man a good scare, but outright execution was not part of her plan. She convinced jurors of this and was able to plead guilty to manslaughter in February of 2023, netting her a 6-year sentence. Henron, meanwhile, was sentenced to 22 years for his creative interpretation of Bose's instructions. Number 7. The Missing Murderer. In August of 2020, a dominatrix who had been missing from New South Wales, Australia for 1 year was finally found in Brisbane and promptly arrested for the death of a client in what appeared to have been a BDSM act gone horribly wrong. When Madeleine Joan Lewin was arrested, she was sporting a close-cropped hairstyle in place of her formerly shoulder-length brown hair, a possible indication that she was trying not to be found. The client she was suspected of having murdered was 52-year-old Anthony Brady, who had met his end in a hotel room in Brisbane, bound and gagged, after he had traveled to the city on business. All available evidence pointed to 34-year-old dominatrix Madeleine Joan Lewin having been the last to see him alive. The last footage of Mr. Brady, taken from a security camera, showed him entering a bottle shop before taking a lift at the Sunshine Tower Hotel just after 8:30 p.m. on August the 12th, 2019. CCTV footage shows Madeleine Lewin leaving the same hotel 4 hours later at 11:30 p.m. while wearing a hoodie and a mask. By the time investigators had connected the dots, Lewin was already in the wind, not to be found for another 12 months. Officials deemed to keep some of the more graphic details away from the public as the investigation ran its course. What they did say was that there were no signs of any natural causes of death, such as a heart attack or stroke. Instead, Brady's demise seemed to have been caused by asphyxiation, consistent with the BDSM gear found on his body. Part of the evidence consisted of text messages and phone calls exchanged between the deceased and the accused, which corroborated with the available CCTV footage and placed the two together in the hotel at the time of his death. Lewin pleaded not guilty to manslaughter charges and decided to represent herself. She remained silent on the stand, although the judge noted that Lewin's failure to provide any evidence against the accusation did not amount to an indication of guilt. A 12-member jury still only took an hour to find her guilty. Lewin was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison. Number 6. Dominion over youth. In August of 2020, 33-year-old Leanne Rhodes of Pensacola, Florida, was arrested over her sexual relationship with 2 teenagers. She allegedly had her victims sign a BDSM contract, among other offenses. When one day her husband noticed her sitting exceptionally close to a teenager, he decided to confront her. Rhodes told her husband that nothing was going on, other than one day the boy had walked up to her, kissed her, touched her chest, and she did not stop it. The husband thought nothing of it at the time, and the couple allegedly laughed the incident off, with the husband thinking his wife had done nothing wrong. But investigators with the local Department of Children and Families received a tip to the contrary. The prosecution originally only knew about one victim. This boy came forward and detailed the sexual escapades between himself and Rhodes, and also showed an assortment of evidence from his mobile phone. He detailed how Rhodes assumed a dominant role in their relationship, disclosed her preferences, and made him agree to be obedient to her wishes. What the boys showed to investigators was already enough to get charges filed, but a second victim stepped up also. Both minors were interviewed by investigators, and their stories corroborated both evidence and Rhodes' eventual confession. Prosecution in the case never got terribly complicated, and Rhodes ultimately pleaded no contest to charges of lewd and lascivious battery and transmitting harmful materials to minors, among others. This led to her being sentenced to 20 years in prison, beginning in June of 2021. Once she gets out, she'll also need to register as a sexual offender and serve 5 years of sexual offender probation. Number 5. Temptress doesn't achieve nirvana. In August of 2017, 25-year-old Georgia woman Erica Freeman, known online as the Dominatrix Temptress Nirvana, was arrested for extorting around $10,000 from a former client and attempting to get even more. Her unidentified victim from Detroit, Michigan, had apparently been thinking of ending their relationship in April of that year, and when he attempted to do so, Freeman demanded that he pay up or she would share everything she had on him, including some fairly compromising photos with his wife and his workmates. The anonymous victim stretched out the process of paying his end-of-game fee for months, getting various rewards from his now former mistress in the process. At one point, she sent him a pair of frilly red panties with demands that he send her photos posing with them, which ended up being added to evidence in the case. She had apparently met him via her Twitter page. In 2016, she used the page as a marketing hub of sorts, where she would post content that showed her services and attracted new clients. Extortion is a felony in Georgia, so despite the fact that the press stopped covering the case before the end of her trial, it's not out of the realm of possibility that the money-hungry dominatrix found herself dominated by the legal system and probably behind bars for years. Number 4. The Dom's Treasurer. In April of 2018, an employee of the Harris County, Texas Treasurer's Office, 56-year-old Gregory Loeb, was accused of embezzling over $20,000 from a credit union in order to pay a dominatrix that he'd become associated with. He allegedly accomplished this through massive credit card fraud. The accusation and subsequent investigation led to Loeb losing his job, and it was eventually found that he had stolen more than $35,000 through his complicated scheme. Loeb had been employed with the county auditor's office for some time before assuming his role with the treasurer's office and eventually moving up to become second in command. These positions gave him a degree of control over taxpayer money, as well as access to a credit union owned and run by county employees. Using this access, he opened a credit card account and quickly withdrew $10,000 through a series of transactions, maxing out the account. Rhonda White, a county official who led the investigation, concluded that Loeb eventually ended up making even more transactions, which ultimately resulted in him pocketing well over $35,000. Most, if not all, of this money apparently ended up in the hands of a dominatrix who was blackmailing Loeb. County officials were quickly accosted by an angry public who collectively asserted that Loeb was stealing taxpayer money It was stated that this was not the case because the funds that he had taken were all from a credit union that was owned and run by local government employees using their own personal money. What exact charges and sentence Louise eventually faced is unclear. It's not known if the dominatrix was ever exposed or prosecuted. What is certain is that things could have been a lot worse. District Attorney Kim Ogg revealed that Louise had access to over $3 billion and he could transfer up to $100 million at a time using his signature. Number 3. Blackmailed by a sex offender? In April of 2017, Connecticut dominatrix Fatin Ann Ward was arrested for extorting money from a client with threats that she would reveal their tryst to the important people in his life if he didn't pay up. The victim, hailing from Mount Kisco, New York, had noticed his dom using her phone during one of their sessions. She informed him that she had recorded everything and negotiated a payout of over $5,000 to keep things discreet. The unnamed victim had paid about half of the sum by the time he decided to contact authorities. Ward, who was on probation at the time of her arrest, was held on a $100,000 bond under charges of voyeurism and larceny, to name a couple. Her previous crime, a sexual encounter with a teenager back in 2000, had forced her onto the sex offender registry and got her the probation that was still active almost 20 years later. It's unclear if the charges in this case stuck or what ultimately happened to Ward. Today's topic was requested by Sarah Patch 616. Username is username Calvin LeBuick 3366, and words fail me, bro. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. No cheesecake for Riker's dom. In April of 2018, a Russian dominatrix by the name of Victoria Nasirova, residing at the infamous Rikers Island prison in New York, began a hunger strike over the treatment she was receiving while locked up. She alleged that she was told to be making too many reports of mistreatment and that those reports would cause her problems in the future. She also alluded to 2 fights she had been in, one of which left her temporarily blinded. Nasirova had been arrested back in 2017 after allegedly drugging and robbing 3 men she had met online. Other offenses that she's been accused of having committed in the US include feeding poisoned cheesecake to a beautician and robbing a pawnbroker. She pleaded not guilty to all charges in April of 2018. There were also 2 serious incidents that took place in her home country of Russia that investigators with multiple agencies, including Interpol, suspect her involvement in. One of those is the fatal poisoning of a woman in 2014, then robbing her before making her move to the United States. Although some of the accusations against Nasirova could not be proven, the prosecution did make one stick: the cheesecake incident, wherein Nasirova poisoned a woman who looked like her with the supposed aim of stealing her identity and heading back to Russia, got her 21 years in prison for attempted murder. The sentence was handed down in April of 2023. A number of charges remain open and might lead to even longer prison time. If this can't get dark enough, then find out what happens when vile predators go wrong. Coming up for you right after number 1. Stay tuned. Number 1. He was led into temptation. On October the 9th of 2020, a priest in Pearl River, Louisiana, was arrested after filming himself having intimate relations with 2 dominatrixes on the altar of the church he served at. 37-year-old Travis Clark, then a reverend and since stripped of his title, had set up a tripod and other gear to capture lewd acts that he performed with 41-year-old Melissa Dixon and 28-year-old Melissa Cheng. His acts with the 2 dominatrixes, who went by Satanatrix and Mistress Ming respectively, prompted the church to burn the altar, which cost the disgraced reverend around $8,000 in reparations. On the night of the incident, some members of the clergy were passing by the church around 11 p.m. and noticed the lights were on. They decided to investigate, only to find their reverend mixed up with the 2 women right on the holy altar. They contacted authorities immediately, and the 3 were taken into custody. The initial charges for all 3 were filed as obscenity, since the hookup happened in full view of the general public. The charges against the 3 were then changed and updated a few times until late 2022 when all three accepted plea deals. The two dominatrices both pled guilty to misdemeanor vandalism while agreeing to testify against the former man of the cloth if things went to trial. Clark, meanwhile, worked with prosecution to construct a plea deal that included a 3-year suspended prison sentence and 3 years of probation along with $1,000 in fines. Bay Area cops. A sordid scandal shook 5 different California police forces, including the Oakland Police Department, during the summer of 2016. In May of that year, at least 24 Bay Area law enforcement officers were investigated for having intercourse with a teenage escort who went by the name Celeste Guap. The latter, from the city of Richmond, was the daughter of a 911 dispatcher. Internal investigators started looking into potential misconduct within the department following the passing of Officer Brendan O'Brien. Prior to his death, O'Brien penned a note revealing that he, as well as some of his colleagues, were soliciting Guap's services. According to the investigation's findings, Guap slept with at least 14 Oakland police officers, including 3 while she was still a minor. In an interview with a local media outlet, Guap, whose real name was revealed to be Jasmine Abuslin, stated that the officers knew she was underage at the time of their encounters. They allegedly gave her the nickname Juvie, short for juvenile. Additionally, 2 Oakland cops were accused of providing Guap with confidential information about impending police stings and operations. In her tell-all interview, the young woman also disclosed the details of a pay-for-intercourse arrangement she made with a retired Oakland police captain in his 80s. Guap met the elderly former cop at a Fleabag motel and had relations with him in exchange for $250. In June of 2016, as the Oakland Police Department was being ravaged by the controversy, Police Chief Sean Went stepped down from his post. During a press conference, Went cited personal reasons for his sudden resignation. According to disciplinary records, most of the officers accused of soliciting Guap were given written reprimands but allowed to keep their jobs, which she said was like a slap in the face. In May of 2017, the Oakland City Council voted in favor of a $1 million settlement for Guap, although the resolution did not include an admission of liability on the city's part. Number 5. Gemma Louise Anderson. On March the 29th of 2022, residents of the town of Peterlee in County Durham, England, spotted a woman turning people's front door handles around the neighborhood. The suspect gained access to 3 different homes, including one where she encountered a vulnerable pensioner. After being challenged by the elderly homeowner, the woman made off with the victim's purse. The East Volume crime team launched an investigation, and within 24 hours, the suspect was identified and arrested. For her crime spree, 38-year-old Gemma Louise Anderson was charged with burglary and attempted burglary. Police also linked her to several similar crimes committed in the area. She told investigators that she used the money she stole to pay off debts and purchase drugs. 2 days after her arrest, Anderson pleaded guilty to her charges and was released on bail, subject to an electronic tag. She was later re-arrested for breaking the conditions of her release. In mid-May of 2022, Anderson appeared at Durham Crown Court, where she was sentenced to 28 months in prison for her crimes. Commenting on the case's outcome, a police spokesperson stated criminals like Anderson plague our communities with their repeat offending to fund their illegal drug habits and often target the most vulnerable. So we are pleased to see her back behind bars. Number 4. Adnan Ahmed. A self-proclaimed lifestyle coach and pickup artist from Scotland was arrested in 2019 for targeting young and vulnerable women in Glasgow and Lanarkshire. 38-year-old Adnan Ahmed, who called himself Addy A Game, reportedly approached dozens of women on the street. He would secretly film their interactions, then post the footage online, offering tips and advice for other men. In many of his videos, Ahmed discussed how to overcome last-minute resistance to intimacy, and even included an audio clip of a woman recorded during intercourse. During the resulting trial, 5 women between the ages of 16 and 21 gave testimonies about how they'd been threatened and intimidated by Ahmed in Glasgow city centre and in Uddingston, South Lanarkshire. One of the victims claimed that the man had followed her on the street before grabbing her head as he attempted to kiss her. A teenager testified that Ahmed called her pretty and repeatedly insisted that she give him her phone number after approaching her and her friend on a secluded street. YouTube removed hundreds of the man's videos and deactivated 2 of his channels following a BBC investigation into the online pickup artist scene. In October of 2019, Ahmed was sentenced to 2 years behind bars after being convicted of 5 counts of threatening and abusive behavior. He was also ordered to be on the offender registry for 10 years. In 2020, however, the verdict was reversed on appeal. The Court of Criminal Appeal ultimately ruled that Sheriff Lindsay Wood, who gave Ahmed his original sentence, denied him a fair and impartial trial. Number 3. Leilani Muñez. Prominent New York City transgender and HIV activist Leilani Muñez was arrested for soliciting a minor, according to legal records obtained by the press in 2022. The 39-year-old, who identifies as female and is HIV positive, began messaging an individual known as Josh in March of that year. The pair met on the dating app Grindr, and during the course of their correspondence, it emerged that Josh was 14 years old. Muñez acknowledged the teen's age, but nevertheless started soliciting intimate favors from him. They arranged to meet up in the Bronx, but instead of the explicit encounter Muñez anticipated, he was confronted by an individual identified only as FM. The latter reportedly worked for the non-profit organization called NY Creeps Spotlight, which aimed to expose people who target minors. FM's brush with Muñez was documented for the non-profit's YouTube channel. The 20-minute video included Muñez being taken into police custody. The activist faced several criminal charges, including attempted forcible touching and attempted endangering the welfare of a child. Earlier in 2022, Muñez had been honored during a pride flag raising ceremony at Bronx Borough Hall. Number 2. Bridget Doet Howell. New Hampshire woman Bridget Doet Howell was employed at Sanborn Regional High School in Kingston when she was investigated for an improper relationship with a student in 2021. Between April and May of that year, the 38-year-old drama coach reportedly had a physical relationship with an 18-year-old boy. Doet Howell, who lived in Merrimack, had intercourse with a student 2 separate times and on a 3rd occasion kissed the teen at school. Consequently, the woman was arrested on charges of felonious assault, as well as 3 aggravated counts of felonious assault. It was the first case in Rockingham County that was prosecuted under a fairly new statute that focuses on the relationship of authority over an alleged victim rather than their age. New Hampshire's Department of Education suspended Doet Howell's license to teach following her arrest. The situation served as a considerable fall from grace for the educator. Back in 2015, she'd been one of 8 finalists for the state's Teacher of the Year award while teaching history and social studies at the Regional Services and Education Center in Amherst. Doet Howell pleaded not guilty to the charges leveled against her. Number 1. Kirby Cwood. Alaska woman Anisha Duffy Murnane was last seen alive on October the 17th of 2019 when she set out for a mile-long walk from her Homer apartment to a medical clinic for an appointment. The 38-year-old never showed up to the clinic, and her disappearance remained unsolved for over 2.5 years. During that time, police dogs tracked her scent to an area near a college campus where it abruptly stopped. Investigators viewed this as an indication that Murnane had likely been picked up in a car around that area. The search effort continued for over a year, but on June the 17th of 2021, Murnane was officially declared dead. In a presumptive death hearing, jurors determined that the woman's most likely cause of death was homicide. Around that time, police identified a man named Kirby Cwood as a person of interest. He worked at Main Tree Housing, the supportive housing complex where Murnane resided. Cwood would occasionally eat meals with the victim as part of a program for the South Peninsula Behavioral Services. The investigation stagnated until April of 2022, when law enforcement received a tip from Cwood's romantic partner. She claimed that the man had spoken to her about the kidnapping and killing of Murnane. The tipster also said that Cwood was in possession of a Timex watch that he stole from the victim. After being questioned by authorities in Alaska, Cwood fled to Ogden, Utah. Local police executed a search of the man's apartment, which included warrants for hair samples and cheek swabs. Officers pulled him over as he left the residence on the day of the search. There were 2 rifles in his vehicle, in spite of a protective order banning him from owning guns. The police also found a machete and other large knives that appeared to have dried blood on them in Calderwood's home. He was arrested and charged with both first and second-degree murder, as well as kidnapping and tampering with evidence. Following Calderwood's arrest, investigators gained a clearer picture of what led to Murnane's demise. On the day of her disappearance, Calderwood's then-girlfriend was reportedly out of town. The man went to her parents' unoccupied house and prepared a crawl space with the intent to torture and kill someone. He then drove around in search of a potential victim and happened upon Murnane walking alone to her doctor's appointment. He kidnapped her and brought her back to the house, where he carried out his sinister plan before disposing of the woman's body in a dumpster. In September of 2022, a grand jury indicted Calderwood on 9 felony counts. If convicted of first-degree murder, he could face up to 99 years in prison as punishment. He remained in custody at the Weber County Correctional Facility in Utah, following his arrest by Ogden police. Once Calderwood completes the jail sentence stemming from his Utah-related crimes, he will be extradited back to Alaska to face the pending charges relating to Murnane's death. Thanks for watching. Would you rather spend 24 hours in a straitjacket or a month in isolation? Let us know in the comment section below.